Welcome to Tricky Fish, a conversation between a millennial daughter and her Gen X dad. Here's your hosts, Rhiannon and Ian.
Okay, so you know how generally people have like New Year's resolutions where like towards the end of the year, beginning of January, they like think about what they've already gone through and like what their intentions are for their next year?
Sure.
Well, I kind of have that process around my birthday though, because with me being born in the end of January and 3 of my kids all have birthdays in the beginning of January, we have like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, their birthday, New Year's, and then their birthdays. And so my birthday kind of marks the time for the holiday season to finally be over. And that's kind of like when my personal year starts over.
Real quick, does New Year's falls in between Christmas and their birthdays? Mm-hmm. Do you get super drunk so that you can handle the upcoming birthdays?
No, I don't have money to buy liquor to get super drunk. I have to pay for 3 children's birthday parties like 3 days in a row.
Happy birthday, kids. Mom's drunk.
No. But
sorry, I just had to ask.
No, I get it. But with that, last year, beginning of 2020, I was thinking to myself, like, I felt that there was going to be a really big change. I didn't think that COVID was going to be that really big change.
I don't think anybody thought that.
For me personally, I just got this feeling of like, I think I'm here to help people, but not in like a famous way where I'm rich and famous and popular, like in that sense. Sure. I think it's much more on like a small scale, but widespread. Right. And so that's kind of where I got the idea of, or like the desire to start a podcast was at this point, it gives me a space to be able to like talk about my crazy ideas, and having somebody with me helps the conversation go. And so I thought I need a co-pilot for it, but everybody I thought about was like either they weren't really that committed to the idea, or like maybe they just didn't have the time, what have you. So like the idea of getting a podcast kind of went on the back burner until you came out to me and you're like, hey, podcast. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. So that is what made me want to create this podcast. Did you want to talk about your reasons before I explain the name?
Well, sure. So I've been kicking it back and forth for doing a podcast for a while. And I've been working on writing a book and becoming an author. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, I need an author platform, but do I do a podcast that's just me and I'm talking about writing, or do I do one that is just random topics? Because that's what I arrived on. I wasn't going to do anything that was like movie specific, TV specific, video game specific, because that would all require me to just be super on top of that. And I'm usually not watching a lot of TV, and I'm more likely to watch movies than TV, but I don't feel like watching enough movies to make it into a podcast.
Right.
And video games, honestly, when I was younger, I used to play like video games all the time. But as I've gotten older, I've really shifted away from that. And so if the weather's good, I'm outside.
Right.
Like going on a hike with my dog, whatever. And I play the most video games when it's really wet and cold and rainy, and I can't get outside. And you can't really do a podcast. It's once a year. Right. And I didn't really want to talk about video games anyway, because I don't really care. So then I was kind of like, well, I didn't know. I'd go back and forth. And I would think like, should I get somebody that I can bounce off of? Should I just randomly start talking? Every time I thought about getting like a co-host, it's like a number of things had to kind of be fulfilled. If I were to choose a co-host, they would have to be somebody that I can bounce off, that we could bounce off of each other and be entertaining. They had to not be dumb.
Which is a hard order to fill.
Which is the hard, and it's not necessarily dumb in the sense that they're like low IQ dumb, but I feel like
dumb as in like when we look at the news and we're like, wow, that is just so stupid.
Yeah.
That is so stupid. Like that kind of dumb.
Well, yeah, but it's also just, they're going to talk about stuff that's like, when you listen to it, you're just like, that is just a dumb take. Mm-hmm. So there's people that in my life that while I like them, I'll hang around with them. They are clearly not somebody I would do a podcast with. Yeah. But there are people that I absolutely would do a podcast with, but it was a timing thing. They are so busy in their own lives that, you know, I didn't think they would be able to commit to a weekly thing. And you have to commit. If you're going to have any success, whether it's a YouTube channel, podcast, whatever, you have to be consistent.
Any kind of platform.
True. Yeah. So I needed to be consistent. And I never thought about you, not because I was like, oh, well, Rhiannon's dumb. No, it wasn't anything like that. Okay, as your father, I wanted to be the good adult father. I didn't want to always be in your life, like always calling you up and being like, did you eat your vegetables? Are you getting enough water?
The answer is no.
I know
I do drink enough water, but I don't eat enough vegetables.
I don't either. But, and I just didn't think about it because I'm like, okay, well, that's like getting too far in your life. And I didn't know whether that would be something you would want to do. So it just never occurred to me. And then when you were like, hey, we should do one together, like it just felt right. Like it was just like, yes, it would work because we have such good conversations. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I
think that is because I'm trying not to use filler words. I'm so sorry, people listening to this. But I think the hesitation there, I'm already seeing a difference in our mindsets because you're looking at me as like, I don't want to be a helicopter parent. And I looked at you as in like, I don't view you as my dad. I view you as my friend. So I'm like, hey, friend, let's do this project together. Let's do it.
Right.
So already it's interesting to see how like our perspectives are different like that.
Sure.
But for the name, I really liked Tricky Fish because Lilo and Stitch, if you like in the very beginning,
I love that movie.
Jumba and Pleakley like come to Hawaii for the first time. Also, Lilo and Stitch spoilers, if that's a thing. They come to Hawaii, they're following Lilo and Stitch around, and they're in the ocean, and Pleakley is like looking at coral reefs and is totally enamored. And then a shark comes out and he's like, tricky fish, because it's a shark when he was just hanging out in the coral reef, living his best alien life in Hawaii.
Didn't he think it was a dolphin?
Yeah. And so I liked the idea for Tricky Fish for this podcast because originally we were going to make the name We Want to Conquer the World, like in a reference to like a really good song that is important to you, which I love, but it gave the wrong impression because like we're not, I don't know, I feel like that was like a really aggressive vibe for what we're giving.
It was a name that at first we were like, yeah, that's a great name. What's funny about that name is that both of us kind of just sat back and we never talked about it. Once we decided that it was going to be We Want to Conquer the World.
Yeah.
We just went ahead with that. Right. But separately, we were like, man, that's a bit aggressive. Like, I don't know if that's the message we want to send.
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of funny because I came to you and I was like, I don't think that's a good name.
Yeah.
Because I felt it was too aggressive. And you're like, yeah, I feel it's too aggressive too. And then I was like, all right, well, let's come up with a different name. And I remember like staying up late. I used a lot of podcast name generators, not because I was looking for it to give me a name,
but just inspiration.
Right. Because when I'm writing stories and I need a name, if I'm not coming up with anything, I'll go to a name generator. And I'll just start plugging things in and I'll just keep hitting refresh until my brain goes, oh, how about this one? Not that whatever's on the screen is what I'm going to use, but it just helps to generate the thing. And I came to you with the list, the really horrible list of what was generated.
It wasn't horrible. It was a condensed name generator that helped me think of Tricky Fish. So it was just like a more rudimentary version of that.
Right. But the moment you said Tricky Fish, it clicked. Like I knew, like, yes, that is the name. That is the name. And I'll tell you, like, finding a name is incredibly annoying. So I have,
as a parent, can confirm.
So I'm only going to bring this up this once.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to like use this to sell my stuff or whatever.
Oh no.
I did create a separate podcast.
Oh yeah.
For my writer platform. And I'll just be talking about my experience as a writer, stuff like that. And the name of that is Empty Pages. Okay. That is not the name that I initially wanted. The name I initially wanted was taken by some kid who back several years ago took this name, recorded 3 podcasts that were like 2 or 3 minutes in length. The first podcast was like, oh, I'm just doing this on a dare. I'm going to talk to girls I like. And like the next 2 episodes, and that was it. That was the first episode. The next 2 episodes, he just kind of just talked about some random stuff for a couple minutes. So there was no girls involved.
Wow.
Yeah. But
so the podcast, like the purpose of it wasn't even fulfilled within those few episodes.
Correct. And not only that, because it's out there and you can Google search it.
Yeah.
I couldn't take that name.
Dang. You know what's wild is my username is Dying Lemur Fetus on like everything because nobody ever takes it.
Right.
But I used a name generator for my SW stuff and I check every time that I like make an account somewhere to try to make sure that like it's not already in use.
Right.
And for whatever reason, my Instagram, like somebody had used the handle for my SW stuff on Instagram, but like their page had literally nothing on it.
Yeah.
It was just was there. And one day I accidentally like hashtagged it or something, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to see. And they deleted it. So then I snatched it right back up.
Nice.
And so now I have like a consistent handle across all platforms. Finally.
Nice. The interesting thing was that when you decided, you're like, hey, we should do it together. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a great idea. When we started talking about like ideas for this, you were a little bit further along in what you had wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I started thinking about this in the beginning of 2020. I had this whole expectation, like everybody does, where I was like, 2020 is going to be the year of personal growth. Like I knew it was going to be a lot of intense, big change. And I was right. Last year still did have a lot of personal growth and change for me too. Like COVID just kind of destroyed everything for everyone.
Sure.
But I started kind of thinking of like, I don't want to keep this personal growth to myself. I want to help other people also heal through the bullshit that they've gone through. And a podcast was a good way of doing that. And so I've kind of, for the last year, I've already had it in my mind of like the ideas I wanted to talk about and how I wanted to go about that. And then it was just like you. I didn't have anybody that lined up. And then the stars aligned, what have you, whatever. And now here we are.
When we started doing this, I really feel like it coming together, I really felt like this was the time that this needed to be done. That like, I don't feel like it was ready to be born prior to this.
Yeah.
But no, what's funny is like, I've actually been thinking about doing a podcast for probably the last 5-6 years. And you just thinking about it in 2020, you came to the table far more along in what you were wanting to do with it than I was. I guess I was just like, let's just figure out if we're doing it.
But I also wonder how much of that is your lack of personal confidence and belief in yourself in actually achieving a goal by yourself. Because at a certain point, like when I first started thinking about the podcast idea, my whole thing is, well, I'm not that interesting. I probably am not that fun to listen to or to talk to. And then I had that whole narrative that kind of held me back from seriously pursuing it. And then the more that I had genuine conversations with people and like talked to people I trust about it, the more I was like, you know what? Maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And if idiots can come onto the internet and make podcasts, if Joe frickin' Rogan can have a podcast, I can have a freaking podcast.
I feel like Joe Rogan, though, like I get the energy you're coming with that. I think Joe Rogan, whether you like him or not, I can see where he's coming from with what he's doing it. I do think Joe Rogan's a bit more of a better example of a podcast personality.
Yeah.
But he also came from a comedy background.
Yeah.
And I love his comedy. But I get what you're saying. For me, it really wasn't like, I mean, there was that, nobody's going to want to hear what I have to say, like whatever. But I was also like, what is it that I'm going to offer that like people would pay for? And I wasn't necessarily thinking about like, I'm going to make money off of it. But because we come from a capitalist society, everything that we do has to have some sort of benefit.
Yeah.
We never just do things for the fun of it.
And that's what I've been trying to change this year.
Yeah, so
starting 2021 has been my goal, is just doing things for the sake of enjoying it.
Sure. And for me, I can say it's not necessarily a lack of confidence, because there's a lot of people that would tell me like they love when I tell stories. They laugh, they enjoy it. And they're like, you should start a podcast. It's like, I'd love to. I don't know what I would talk about. I don't know that anybody would want to listen to it. But when you and I talked about it, what really broke it down for me and cleared the table, as it were, is that we both came to this going, we don't care if this makes money. We don't care if we do this and we only get pity listens from friends and family. We're going to do this because it's fun. The other thing, too, is that as we've done this, as a father and daughter, we've also bonded over this.
Yeah. And not even going to lie, low-key, part of me was like, what if we start doing this project and we end up like hating each other's guts again?
So, okay. So you say again, and I think that to let people know, for people who are listening to this for the first time, we have had a rocky relationship over the years. We started out having a good relationship, then we ended up not really having a good relationship, and then we ended up repairing the relationship, and it started going better, and then it went to shite, and then eventually just went to the point where we weren't talking to each other.
Blocked on Facebook, phone numbers, like literally no communication of any kind.
Exactly. And then now here we are doing a podcast, which is amazing. And that is one of the things that, as you listen to our podcast, the goal of our podcast is to hopefully be entertaining first, but also to be helpful And so some of the episodes, they're going to be lighthearted. They're going to be just goofy stuff. They're not really going to be anything deep, but there are also going to be episodes that are a lot deeper.
I was going to say, I'm an Aquarius, so I thrive on chaotic and like new ways of thinking and new conversations. So like you can't set those expectations.
I'm a Leo and worship me. No, as people go through and listen, I know that there are people out there that don't have good relationships with their parents or their children.
Or necessarily have good habits with building relationships in general.
Right.
Because interpersonal relationships, whether platonic or romantic, can be just as complicated as familial relationships too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That is things that we will talk about in future episodes. You will hear deeply personal stuff about us. So hopefully that when you listen to that, you hear and maybe you can look at that at your own life and see that it's not hopeless per se. If you're a child who is estranged from their parent or vice versa, I want to just tell you that there is hope. And I'm going to tell you, Rhiannon is a lot like me in temperament and personality. So that has been part of the clash. But we've managed to work through that, and we're going to relate that as it pertains to whatever the topic is. And hopefully we can reunite parents and children or grandparents and grandchildren.
I do want to make sure that we have the expectation set, though, too, of inclusivity.
For sure.
So like, LGBTQ, BLM, all that good stuff. Like we are a positive, nurturing, welcoming environment.
Right.
Now, even though I say those letter mafia, alphabet mafia is what they call them, whatever. Even though I say those things, people that listen to this are allowed and encouraged to form their own opinions, do their own research, all that good stuff. And I am more than willing and welcoming people to like have conversation, but it needs to be a conversation and not trolling or arguing or specifically doing things to hurt other people or like cause grief to other people. And not because I'm trying to police how people spend their time and how they act.
Agreed.
I just don't want that kind of negativity and bad energy to pull away from what we're trying to do.
I totally agree.
And I just feel like it's a waste of my time, which I'm not willing to waste. I'll block people. I'll delete comments, whatever I gotta do.
Sure.
Life is short, and I'm not going to waste it with people on the internet who are committed to misunderstanding other people,
Yeah. So if you're approaching us with bad faith, we're not going to engage. We're all on this planet together. We're all going to do this in good faith. I also want to say that we are going to largely stick to our lane, and it's not because we don't want to talk about things that are important. But there are things that I feel it's not in our wheelhouse to talk about.
I feel like it would be inappropriate for us to talk about things of like other races and other cultures that we know nothing about.
Correct.
And just glorified Google searches don't necessarily do the justice.
That's true. But one of the things that we did talk about was having guests on.
Yeah.
So I'm throwing that out because as we get better situated and better set up to be able to do these things, I would like to bring on guests that can talk about things that are not in our lane so that we can try to foster understanding. So if you're interested in doing it, at some point we'll have a way for you to submit
maybe that
an
could
application.
be a way people leave comments. Like instead of a review, you could just be like, hey, I have an idea for the topic. Here's this. Or, hey, I would love to talk to you about this. And then that would be a great way to get our attention and, also leave comments because that's helpful.
Well, we
And
definitely want the reviews. Reviews get us noticed. They get our podcast out there.
I know,
but yeah, for sure. I mean,
Twitter. Twitter would be a good way to get out to us too.
Twitter would be a good way to do that. Trickyfishpodcast.com is our website. So yeah, there's ways to reach out. So if you have questions you want us to answer, we'll answer. Again, we're only going to answer things that are asked in good faith. If you're asking in bad faith,
we'll just ignore it. Yeah.
Just save your time and our time because we're not going to deal with it. And then if you have suggestions for things you want us to talk about, reach out. Let us know. We'll definitely do that. And hopefully we can spark conversations. And ultimately, I would like to hope that whatever our efforts are nets a positive gain, good karma, whatever you want to believe in.
You want to know what's interesting?
What?
Lately, I've been really trying to conceptualize, sorry everyone, the purpose of human life. You know, I feel like that's a big question that everyone kind of tackles in their own way. And religion gives people a way to deal with those ideas and like to kind of feel comforted in the fact that we don't know what happens after this, you know? And I've decided, like, I've always subscribed to, I don't even know if that's the right word. I've always
mean subscribe?
Yes, gosh, I'm so nervous. I'm so sorry, internet. I've always subscribed to a very hedonistic view in that I think the point of being alive is to experience as much of it and enjoy as much of it as you can. So that's kind of been my mentality of like, I want to do everything. I want to experience everything. That does include bad things too, you know, the pain. We can't have the good without the pain, all that, yada, yada, yada. But I've been trying to think of my personal life purpose, like what I'm specifically here for. And like I said, I don't think it's some big grand gesture like being famous or anything like that. I think my purpose is to find out how to be the happiest version of me, because when I'm that version, I can take care of more people, and then I can pour that love into people that aren't otherwise getting it. And with this podcast, it gives me more of a reach. Instead of being limited to people that I'm able to see in person, which during COVID is incredibly difficult.
Right.
And I hate video chatting and I hate talking on the phone for free. I did it for my job for years. So like now I just hate phone calls. So for me, I'm kind of testing if this really is, air quotes, my purpose in life, if this would be like how I achieve that. Because I just want to help people grow and heal and figure out what their best life looks like for them, and help people realize that we can all have that. It's just that we're living in a capitalistic garbage society that is built to keep us down. And I want to help everybody break out of that. And so this podcast for me is kind of like an experiment of like, if I do have that option and I do try, is it actually going to be helpful? Am I actually going to be able to help people evolve like that? And if not, I can then adjust and think of something else to do that. But like, I'm kind of looking at this as like a science experiment a little bit.
Personally, I aim to misbehave. No.
I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good.
You're right.
Hashtag Harry Potter.
I do want to be helpful. I think if we help even one person, I think that it will be totally worth it.
Do we count as that one person? Because we, like, if we were to compare like our starting point of that conversation in the diner where we were like had that confrontation to now, we've made a lot of progress, sure, but like we could get closer. We could, like, we're spending quality time doing this right now.
Sure.
So technically, if this goes well and our relationship evolves to be even better, would that count as the one person? Like, good enough for you of, like, that's the one person that you helped? Or are you thinking, like, strangers?
I'm thinking about strangers because it definitely works for us. But prior to us deciding to do this, our relationship was already on the mend. We were already working on these things. I feel like doing this has kind of accelerated it in some ways. But I don't really want to be necessarily selfish with it, to be like, oh, we did it. We helped ourselves. Whoop, whoop, pat ourselves on the back. Right. Hey.
Which, hey, I do that, though.
Really?
Yeah. So, like, for example,
I think it's okay to congratulate yourself on achieving things.
Well, yeah, it's really important to give yourself recognition because most of the time nobody else is going to. But also, we grow up thinking that small things aren't just as important as like big grand gestures, but in reality our life is completely compiled of small things that we do every day.
Absolutely.
And so like an easy example is I'm not a morning person at all. I hate existing before 8 a.m. if I went to sleep. If I stayed up all night, then I don't care. But if I went to bed and I have to wake up before 8 a.m., I'm not a fan. And with my job, I used to have to be at work at 3:30 or 4 a.m. Oh, and I could not stay up all night because it's a customer service-based job, so I need sleep, right? So what I would do is the night before, I would plan my outfit as in like the entire thing, the bra, the underwear, the pants, the shirt, the shoes, the socks, all of it. Have it all laid together, like right in one easy spot, like in my bathroom or something. And I'd have my work bag already packed, whatever. That way, in the morning, when I know I've slept through every single alarm and am in, like, undoubtedly probably running a little bit late, sure, I can literally just run to the pile, put them all on, grab my bag, go. And then I'm like, way to go, past me. And then I pat myself on the shoulder because past me totally had my back.
Hey, that's a success, which we will be talking about in a future episode.
So, yeah, Tricky Fish Podcast. We're here to broaden your way of thinking, for us to grow and learn, and share that with people on the internet. It's just funny because you used to tell me all the time, like, don't post personal things on the internet.
Yeah, and here we are talking about personal stuff. Yeah, I get you. Well, but we're not going to be podcast episodes where we go, here's our address.
Yeah.
Here's how to find us.
Yeah.
Here's where we work. Yeah, none of that's going to be on there. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in to the, like, is this the prelude?
This is the...
Or not preface, right?
This is episode 1, the one about the podcast.
I love that title.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well then, thanks for joining us for Tricky Fish episode 1, the one about the podcast. I'm Rhiannon.
And I'm Ian. This has been another episode of Tricky Fish. If you enjoyed what you heard and want more of it, you can follow us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Please leave us a review, as that really helps us out. You can find us at trickyfishpodcast.com, as well as on Twitter at trickyfishpod.